Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. My name's Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. Lots of things go on in the nerd world, and lots of things we could be talking about on the show, like the new Alien movie, the cancellation of The Acolyte, the more about the Robert Downey Jr. dead Doctor Doom thing. But instead, we're going to go way back in the Wayback Machine for something that is a very specific time in we're not Gen Z. Are we Gen Z? No, we're Gen Y. We're Gen Y. I don't know what you are. I'm Gen Y, millennial.
Millennial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The millennial. that voice you heard was Tai Gooden. Hi, Tai.
Hi.
I realized I forgot to introduce you. But so anyway, what we're talking about today is a book series that only lasted 5 years, but produced 54 mainline books and 10 spin-offs, which is a crazy amount of books for such a small amount of time. Granted, they were pretty short books.
Indeed.
And at some point, because both you and I were avid readers, and continue to be avid readers, but we'll talk about maybe more I guess the books that have more longevity, like a Goosebumps or something like that later on, in another episode. But this week, Ty was adamant that she wanted to talk about Animorphs, which of course were credited to K.A. Applegate, but were really written by Catherine Applegate and her husband, and also a number of
ghostwriters.
A number of ghostwriters later on for various other reasons. She was a very busy person and was writing multiple series at the same time. So you cannot fault her for getting ghostwriters. And also 54 books in 5 years is insane.
Yeah. She definitely said that, like, all of the ideas and the concepts and stuff, because, and I could talk a little bit more about what the series is actually about, but she was saying that all the ideas and stuff came from her and came from her husband. They would just kind of lay out the concept and like the overall structure of the story that they wanted, and the ghostwriters would just kind of come in and fill in the gaps there. So it wasn't like somebody was just coming in and making things up. So it definitely felt like the same person was writing all of the books when you read them. Like, there wasn't really too much of a difference in like the book's tone and kind of their pacing and all that stuff like that, which is actually pretty impressive to bring in random people like that and be able to still keep things seamless.
Excuse me. I find that stuff so fascinating because, as far as we know, like an R.L. Stine or somebody like that did not have ghostwriters, but also he did not have, I don't think he wrote at that high of a clip, although he was writing Fear Street and other stuff at the same time too. So it's hard to say, but
yeah, I mean, but it was a long span of time, like many, many years of Goosebumps and not as many years of Fear Street. And it wasn't as much production of Fear Street either. Like, there aren't as many of those books as it is with Goosebumps and some other like YA things of the time. So it seems a lot more plausible for him to be able to do a couple of things.
Yeah. But this, like, when we were kids, it was really I'm sure there were some before, and I just don't know. I guess like Tom Swift, or certainly like my dad grew up reading the Hardy Boys books and stuff like that. So it's not like this was a brand new thing, but I do feel like there was a big push of genre like horror and sci-fi stuff when we were, in the 90s, I guess, for younger people. We had stuff like Are You Afraid of the Dark or something like that, which is a pretty dark show, but it is aimed at kids. And then you
Tales
had
of the Crypt.
Tales from the Crypt Keeper was the cartoon one. I do not think most adults should have let their kids watch Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah. But yeah, so what, first of all, why did you want to talk about these? Because this is something we had mentioned, it just so happens that we've had a lot of more topical things to talk about on the show, but one of the hallmarks, as longtime listeners will know, has always been weird nostalgia stuff. And this was something that you wanted to talk about. So what got you into these books? What are the books, I guess, first of all, but then why did you want to talk about them so much?
Well, I guess I'll talk about how I got into them first. So, like you said, I mean, we kind of grew up in an era where sci-fi, mystery, creepy, like campfire ghost story things were kind of like this big deal, right? And so I was a library kid. I grew up poor and I grew up in a rural area. So it was kind of like, what could I get my hands on that was either free or my mom could afford? So I would go to the library a lot. I like the Boxcar Children. I like the Hardy Boys. I read a lot of Nancy Drew. Like I was a huge Nancy Drew fan. So I was just into like mystery solving things like that. But I also was a sci-fi and a horror person. So I got into Goosebumps, pretty early and latched on the Fear Street. And Animorphs was one that just hit all the weird points for me, like looking at the cover alone
Yeah,
and seeing
we'll
like
get
a
into the
kid kind
covers.
of morphing over into this animal. It's like, what the heck is this? And they used to have them at the library, and you could also get them when you went to the Scholastic Book Fair, which we all know was it's not as big now. I have kids, so I do still go to the book fair, and it's not as big of a deal. But gosh, when you were, in the '90s, like the Scholastic Book Fair was just everything to go to, and they would be there, and they were inexpensive. So I got hooked on them then, and they would have them at the library, and sometimes they would have like bargain bin sales and stuff like that too. And I love the characters. Like fell in love with like the weirdness of the story. Some of it was uh, like really heart pounding and heart racing and stuff like that. And it dealt with a lot of things that were definitely over my head at the time, but it made me question a lot of things around me and question the world around me and just piqued my curiosity about a lot of stuff. So it fed into a little bit more of a weird sci-fi like niche that I wanted to fill as opposed to Goosebumps that usually played a lot more like horror straight or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I what I find really interesting about because yeah, like um and also Goosebumps were for the most part there were like sequelized ones, but like it was
right. There were a lot of
standalone
standalone
books.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Animorphs was a continuing story and like it you can just hear the concept. Oh, it's kids who can turn into animals. Like, oh, that's fun or whatever. But
Yep.
it's a much darker and sort of like it's kind of dystopian in a lot of ways, like or trying to avert dystopias and things like that. And I think that was a big thing, and that's just a big thing in YA kind of sci-fi speculative media anyway. Is this sort of like fighting the evil government and stuff like that. That's just kind of a big deal. But in all of those, like even because they eventually, where I really knew about Animorphs was the Nickelodeon TV series, which only lasted 26 episodes
Yeah.
for a very small amount of time. But um, that was at the time when they were making like The Secret World of Alex Mack, which was like also just kind of a silly kids sci-fi show, but it was about like a horrible, evil
They
government agency that was out to get her and all
Yeah,
this
things
stuff.
and
And
they were always really, really weird. They had these quirky characters on them. They
yeah,
always looked, really, they were kind of just low budget.
sure.
It just really oddball, wild shows. Like they didn't fit in with like the normal Nickelodeon offerings. Like you had like all that and some of the things that were a lot more shiny and polished looking and stuff like that. Like these shows, Are You Afraid of the Dark? All of those were definitely for like the sci-fi, the horror, the
hmm
mystery, like weird kids to be able to be able to get into. I like the TV show, and I did watch it, but I just wasn't into it as much as I was with the books. Like they changed a lot of the ways that some of the characters would be able to morph. Some of the things that Kay Applegate really hit hard on, like especially in terms of like war and her commentary on it and like genocide and stuff, they kind of backed off of that and had to soften it up a little bit for television. I imagine you probably can't get into some of the some of the more horrific things in there that happen in those stories. But I guess I should go back and kind of do like a overarching like explainer
Yeah.
of what they
Let's
of what they
yeah,
are
let's do
before we
this.
get too
Yeah.
far.
Probably there
So
are people who don't know what these are. So let's fill them
right,
in.
yeah, and they've been listening like, "What the hell are you talking about?" So but, so Animorphs came out, again, late '90s through early 2000s. It was 54 books. It was a sci-fi fantasy series, and it centered around a group of kids who ended up gaining these powers to be able to morph into any animal that they touched. Eventually, they kind of had like a signature animal that they would
Mm,
morph into, but the initial concept was if they were touching an animal, they could morph into it. They could take on the animal's characteristic. They had these weird like telekinetic powers while they were morphed, but you didn't want to morph too long, otherwise you'd get
right.
stuck as that animal.
Yeah, I
and
remember that
and
being a
that
big thing.
yeah, that could be a really bad thing, and that kind of became a plot point a couple of times where it's like you're trying to get someone to morph back, but too many bad things are happening for them to do it at a time. So the way that they got the powers was through this Andalite prince named Prince Elfangor actually crashed to Earth after this big like space galactic battle, and him and his ship were there. They actually absorbed the powers and stuff from him. Later on, he ends up dying pretty shortly after, and they befriend his brother, whom they call Axe. He has like this really long, ridiculous
Yeah.
name, and so they end up befriending Axe. Um, and the next thing you know, here come the Yerks, and these are like these slug-looking, like parasitic, alien-like things that can crawl into a living organism's orifices, take over their brain, and operate their body. Which again, like thinking about this for a YA series is nuts. Of course, the Yerks want to take over Earth. The Animorphs cannot let them do that, so they basically become these child warriors of sort, trying to fight against the Yerks while also trying to remain normal and keep up with their average teenage lives and love and dating and coming of age and all of that stuff like that. So it's like a big mix of horror. They talk a lot about war. There's a lot of commentary and a lot of genocide that happens, which is really dark. Of course, it's like all wrapped up in like this coming of age story. So that's kind of like the basis overall. The books usually come from one person's specific perspective.
Mm.
So there was a group of five. There was a sixth person for a while until they booted him out. I could probably talk about that later. That's
Yeah,
one
let's
of
talk
the
about that too.
yeah, it's one of the bad stories there. But there was a core group of five plus Axe made six technically, and so you would usually hear the stories from one person's perspective, and they had like really great interpersonal relationships. Of course, you had the one person that was you'd have somebody that was valiant, and then there was Rachel, who is my favorite, who was kind of like the warrior of the group, and she was literally like, "Oh, it's on site. I'm standing on business. I'm about to fight any and everything that crosses my path." So that's kind of like a overall story. So again, whereas Goosebumps had different characters that would kind of rotate out and stuff, they may have some stories that may have a part one or part two, but a lot of them were standalone. These stories all kind of tied in together, and it was just a series of them traveling to weird places, sometimes ending up in alternate dimensions, having to deal with all sorts of space beings, and trying to figure out a way to defeat them and keep Earth safe. And spoiler alert, the books do not have a happy ending because K.A. Applegate said specifically, if I'm making a book about war and about genocide and, this dystopian society, or this society that's kind of teetering on the brink of dystopia, why would I make it have a happy ending? And I really love that.
Yeah, well, that is a wild like scenario. The fact that you
It's
know
books for children.
these are books for children. Yeah, I love that. It's I I'm looking at the character names and I definitely remember a lot of this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, Visser 3, of course, is like the main antagonist, I think, of the
Yeah,
series.
yeah, the leader of the Yerks.
Yeah, the Yerks.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and yeah, it's such a fun. I'm looking too at like everybody's like signature morph, and like I remember really liking Tobias, who turned into a red-tailed hawk.
Yes.
That was always I for some reason I just was like that would be rad to be able to fly and whatever. And I was always a bit like in everything. I was always a bigger fan of the secondary good guy character who was like, I mean, the Han Solo of the group. Let's be fair.
Right, yeah,
Like
yeah.
Jake is your typical goody two shoes, and you want to have a little bit of
Exactly. He
danger.
always kind of plays second
Yeah.
fiddle to Jake a little bit. Tobias was always funny whenever he turned into something that was not a hawk. Like there's one story, um, gosh, what's it called? I believe it's called The Test. And so Tobias ends up becoming this hungry centipede, and he fantasizes about eating everyone else in the group in like these really horrific, gruesome ways. Like they're trying to solve what's going on around them or whatever. And all he can think about is how he can eat everyone else. Like he just always ended up into some kind of awful, like gross mess all the time. And I felt so bad for him. He was a character that spent a lot of time like in his head. So he would have all of these things, even when he wasn't in something, that weird. He was always in his head about something. And things would just be happening around him. And it's like, Tobias, like, snap to it and get it together, buddy. Like,
I find that stuff incredible because like it takes such a like I guess, a confidence in your own premise and your own characters that stuff like that can happen, and just kind of just, backhandedly teaching kids about what animals do and think like and stuff like that
Yeah.
too. But um I can't like imagine like I'm gonna write a whole book about how one of the main characters wants to eat the other ones. Not for real. Like it's just such a silly idea. Um
It's
and
so silly. And I mean, I like I said, I think I enjoyed the TV show for what it was, but this just seems like, and one of the reasons I did really want to talk about it is because when I think about kind of like these lost like relics from childhood, things that didn't get as much shine as the series that shall not be named and, Lord of the
mm,
Rings and other things like that that are kind of popular and actually are, especially with Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power, like it's still very much in our like pop culture zeitgeist right now or whatever. Like I feel like it's like Animorphs is kind of like the one that got overlooked and the one that got left behind. Because even growing up, I felt like it was a very small group. And again, I'm speaking from, my experience and like where I went to school and the people I hung out with. I felt like it was a very small group of us that were into this one specific thing. Like everybody was into the, the magical wizard series, right? Everybody like, Lord of the Rings and all that stuff like that. But I feel like Animorphs is the one that got left behind. And it's one I think that could definitely come to a series now with the I mean, gosh, especially if you get it, with a Netflix or a Disney or
mm,
something budget behind it, like it would be so cool to be able to see this come to fruition. And it's got a lot of stuff to say and a lot of themes and stuff that show up in that book are super relevant now. I mean, and
mm,
kids are so much more not that we weren't aware of things that are, that were going on us around the world, around us in the world and stuff like that. But kids are so hyper aware, so much more hyper aware of those things because of social media and everything. Like it would be really cool to see a new generation latch on to this and have different points of discourse and then also just have something really weird and fun that's like it has some serious themes and stuff that but it's also geared very specifically towards kids of a particular age like they need more kids need more weird things
yeah.
to be into.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we're I don't what weird because like there's stuff like that I have absolutely no idea about, like skibbity toilet, I guess is a thing. I don't know what that means. It
Yeah,
just sounds disgusting.
it's weird but it's just weird in a way that it's weird stupid.
Yeah,
Not weird engaging
sure.
or, weird captivating or anything like that. Like this is strange and odd in a way that it draws you in and is captivating and it's still telling, a compelling story and you still have stakes in your story. You've got great interpersonal relationships between like the Animorphs group and everything like that. Like Skibbity Toilet, which I'm so sad that I know what that is, but
You have children,
unfortunately,
I do
I
not,
have
so
kids,
it
so
makes
I
sense.
know
Yeah.
dumb things, and I'm a little plugged into some of the things they're watching on TV. Like a lot of the stuff is either like either weird, stupid like that, or it's like super shiny, polished stuff. Like there's nothing that's kind of like rough around the edges and
Yeah.
strange for them to be able to get into. And like I've got kids who are very much into a lot of the things I was into. Like my youngest is 10 and she's going through Goosebumps books right now and loves, Nancy Drew
Mm,
and now we're, trying to see if we can get our hands on some Fear Street stuff for her and everything. But that's what she's into. She's 10 and she likes the Scream franchise and like probably
yeah.
shouldn't be watching some of this stuff. But I mean, I also was watching these things at that age, so I can't be mad at her. And I'm like, I mean, there's a whole group of kids out there waiting for something like this to kind of come to their attention. And hopefully it'll encourage people to like get into it, check them out. There used to be a forum. Um, and we wrote about it a few years ago. Actually, it was like at the very beginning of COVID. I don't know how long it was out there, but at one point in time, all 54 books were available, like for just a giant like PDF download.
Mm, yeah.
And a lot of people got into it then because that was back when some controversy came around the Wizard series,
Mm,
specifically the creator. And so people were like, instead of supporting this person, we should have been supporting K.A. Applegate the whole time. And people started kind of like talking about that series. And, Catherine Applegate even came out herself and was like, no, we're not going to make people take it down. If they're sending PDFs to each other and stuff, like I wrote it for people to enjoy it. So just enjoy it. And also don't be a terrible person and love all people.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny too, because like, what is you know, th- on a very wide scale, the kind of conceit behind Animorphs is changing and finding yourself and like doing all this stuff, and
Right.
it's like
Yeah. And I mean, I
clearly,
feel like there's she, of course, there was wanting to educate kids about animals and get them more into those things because she's a big animal lover.
yeah,
But, there's definitely commentary there that could resonate with a lot of kids now, especially kids who are, I mean, not just trying to find yourself because that's a part of your journey
sure, yeah,
as a youth anyway, but especially, youth that are, in LGBTQ communities and stuff like that. Like, I mean, oh my gosh, you could just imagine how much that would resonate with them. And I'm sure probably resonated with a lot of, youth at our time who were
mm,
going through those same things. And it was definitely at a time where you felt a lot less safe being
hmm
who you are. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah. I mean, and there's stigma about that stuff now, but like in
mhm.
the '90s, it was literally the president passed like "don't tell anybody anything" kind of things
Right. Yeah.
for your own
Yeah,
safety, but also like,
at the era of don't ask, don't tell, and
yeah,
you've got this story that's all about, kids being able to, to change and change and
yeah,
morph and show up in different versions and stuff. But, even if they're kind of playing both sides, no matter how they choose to show up in the world, they're making
mm,
change and it's okay to be
yeah,
you, to be all facets of yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me how many of those kind of stories that are, sci-fi kind of superhero-y type stories
Mhm.
really have that as, whether intentional or not, like that's sort of the underlying thing is like, secret identities and like all this stuff is very and being especially, I mean, like obviously I'm a huge X-Men fan, but like that's a huge part of that too, is like the world hates you for who you are, but you're still going to be, you're still going to excel even despite all that, and
Right.
save the world, and all that stuff. Like that's it's power fan or it's I won't say a power fantasy, but it's a fantasy, but it's one that like I feel like, and this too, like saving the world from an alien invasion through the power of our weird thing that we have. Like
Right.
it's really, it's resonant. I think I love that kids got a chance to read those books, and I know they were super duper popular. The problem was, as with most things, I am an elder millennial, so I was only when did they start? It's 96, we said.
Mhm.
So they went
Yeah.
from 96 to 2001. I was 12, between 12 and um like 16 when those came out. So like
Right. Yeah.
so that was a bit it was a bit after my time.
Yeah,
Um
see, for me, I was right there in that target age group because I'm kind of like in the slam in the middle of like the millennial
right.
spectrum. So at the time, I was like at the tail end of elementary school and through middle
Mm,
school. Yeah, so when they stopped producing those books, I was just going into high school. So
right.
I was right there at the target age that they were looking for and aiming for and stuff. And I mean, they definitely definitely got me with those weird covers. Like that was the first thing that drew me to it. Like I was always such a super, visual person and stuff. I didn't get a chance to get my hands on as many comics as I wanted to, but I've always been somebody that's definitely been into like graphic novels and,
Mhm.
and the visualness of it or whatever. That was what got me into Goosebumps too, like the raised lettering and the
Oh my
Goosebumps
gosh.
title and the weird, photos and all the stuff like that, like the say cheese and die with the skull,
Yeah.
and all of that.
Yes,
Like,
those are iconic, absolutely.
right. Like you may not even remember all the parts of the story, but or all the characters or any of that stuff like that, but you definitely like those covers stick out on your mind. Like when
Mm,
you think of Slappy, like there are very specific images of him that like stick out to you
yeah.
all these years later.
Well, and that's why, like, when they made the Goosebumps movie, Slappy looked a lot more like the one on the book cover than the one in the TV show, because they made the one on the
Mhm.
TV show look a lot grosser looking. Like, it didn't look like a puppet, like it, or
Yeah.
a ventriloquist dummy. It looked like a weird
Yeah.
monster
Yeah.
that they made for a TV show. Um, yeah, I'm fascinated by these because I definitely remember the type, and I'm sure you've seen them online, folks, even if you don't know the Animorphs, but like there were always, 5 to 6 different images of one thing, kind of, I have to say, sometimes terrifyingly turning into an animal, either a person turning into an animal, sometimes an animal turning into another animal, and then quite often there's an alien, which I'm assuming is the Axe character, turning into an animal.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that one that you mentioned, the test, it's a kid like behind, but it's a hawk turning into a giant centipede. That is a terrifying
Yes.
cover. That cover is really
It's so great.
quite scary. And then people turning into, it's I highly recommend people looking these up because it's just so weird looking. A kid turning into a bee, a kid turning into an ox. Like,
There was one time that an ant
oh, I think I
touched
saw that one.
there's like this so there's the blue box, which basically came and crashed down with the prince when he crashed down. And so if you touch that box, you're able to get those powers. An ant touched that box and somehow ended up turning kind of into Rachel. So it was an ant, half human, and it was like screaming and freaking everybody out.
Oh my
And I was just
gosh.
like, oh my gosh, like just weird. So many weird, so many weird, ridiculous stories in there.
Yeah. Oh man. These, and they're kind of janky looking, and that's kind of
Yes.
why I love them, because like, especially early, some of them are very like the kid is very photorealistic on it,
Hmm.
or even just a photo of a kid, and then like, turning into a snake, and it's just like, oh, this is terrifying. Like, this one here has Rachel turning into a mouse.
Yes.
Um, the solution, is that the one you were mentioning? Maybe that could be a rat. Like, it's hard to tell size.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a six member that kind of, well, a six human member, I'll say that joined them for a while named David. And David
Mm,
came in and he was a pain in the butt, basically. You always kind of have that one person that just really doesn't follow the ethos of what they were going for. He was mad because things weren't going his way. So they ended up booting David out. They convinced him to turn himself into a rat. They put him in a cage. They took him out to a deserted island and left him screaming like however a rat would scream, I suppose. Left him screaming on an island and just like abandoned him there. And I'm like, it's so dark. It's like, no, you're not. You can't be rehabilitated. We're gonna turn you into a rat and and abandon you on an island, and you're
yeah.
stuck being a rat because he was a rat more than a couple of hours, so he was stuck as a rat for the rest of his human life, presumably to be eaten or to die
Oh, okay. Let
on
me
that
read
island.
the character description on Wikipedia, because it's got everything on there. It's what you said, but like, this is horrifyingly written. Okay. David, a boy who joins the Animorphs after learning their secret. The
Yeah.
Animorphs trust him at first, giving him the ability to morph and fight with them rather than allow the Yeerks to take him, but he betrays them. He
Hmm.
comes to the he comes to reason that it is morally okay to attempt to kill the Animorphs while they are morphed, as they are not humans during that time. Ultimately, they are forced to trick him into morphing into a rat and trap him permanently in the morph, leaving him stranded on an island only inhabited by rats. He later return.
I
He
forgot
returns
there were
later
other
in the
rats there.
series, eventually asking Rachel to kill him. Whether Rachel kills David or not has never been established. That is so dark.
It's dark. It's dark. I forgot that he turned, like, again, it's been a long time since I've read some of these. I forgot he came back, and you don't know if he died or not. Like, she probably killed him. Knowing Rachel, she probably killed him
Yeah.
because she was she was literally the killer of the group. Like,
Yeah.
it was definitely on site for her at all
The,
times.
the fact, oh, I mean, just the fact that they were like, well,
Child
and
soldiers in an intergalactic war is
yeah,
crazy.
but also having a character who goes, well, you're not a person, so I can kill you.
So I can
Like,
kill you. Yes.
okay.
It's not okay.
That is super dark. I can't believe this series. I mean, I can, because you get away with it because it's got cute animals on the cover, or gross animals, but still animals.
Yeah, it's just it's so bizarre. Like,
Here's
oh
a girl
man.
turning into an anteater. Like,
Yes, I remember people talking about it on LiveJournal, back during my LiveJournal days.
oof. Oh, Marco turns into a cockroach. Yeah, some of this stuff is gross.
Some
And
stuff
like,
is really gross.
and so these books would come out pretty frequently, and then you'd go to the Scholastic Book Fair.
Mhm.
At least at a lot of schools in America was the
Right, right.
Scholastic Book Fair, and there would just be, it was always the best. So back in the days, that's when I got into like Goosebumps, but also like the
Mhm.
Bunnicula books. I don't know if you remember those, where there was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
a rabbit who was a vampire, but since it's
Yes.
a vampire rabbit, it only sucks the juice out of carrots or vegetables.
It
And
was
I don't know
very
why that
weird.
was. And like a dog and a cat, and eventually a second dog, were like afraid of him. and just it was a very strange book. But
Mhm.
so there were all those books, and like that's when I got Charlotte's Web for the first time and stuff like that. But what they used to do at my elementary school was they would take um they would basically put up a table or something like that in the library, like a
Yeah.
huge long table, and there would just be books everywhere. And my mom would send me to school with my money in a little envelope, and it'd be like,
Mhm.
if they have these books, get them. If they don't have one of them, here's this secondary books to get and everything like that. And
Right.
it was the best. It was like,
Yeah, they'd send home that paper,
yeah, the paper
and
with
I'd get my
everything.
paper and look through it would only be like a couple of, couple of it was a little brochure that had, like, just a couple of pages
Oh,
in it or whatever, but you
yeah.
could go through and just, like, circle what you wanted, and you hope that your class got to go in enough time and that nobody bought up all of the book that you wanted, so you didn't have to go to your second choice, like, it was fantastic, like, those things, like, meant so much to me, especially because, again, being in a single parent household where, like, money
Yeah.
wasn't circulating around a whole lot, like, that was a thing that I would do little things in the neighborhood and try to save up money. And, my mom would save money or whatever. So that way I could go to the book fair and be able to get the books that I wanted. They weren't super expensive or anything like that, but I would want large quantities of them. Like I would want to buy several Goosebumps books at a time. And, the Fear Street books would be there. With Nancy Drew and, like, the older books like that, we always got those from our library. They would be circulating out old books, so they would have, like, a big book sale there. We used to go to those a whole lot, and they would have, like, the bargain bins that had a dollar bin with these books and a $2 bin with these books, and so you could just as long as you rummage through the bin, you could find whatever find whatever you want to find, and I would find a lot of Nancy Drew books in there. Or sometimes people would just give away books,
Mm,
and they would have a book giveaway at the library.
yeah.
So that was how I built up my Nancy Drew my Nancy Drew collection.
God, the brochures were the best because yeah, like the
They
pictures,
were.
you would just like I folks, I
I could
feel like
see myself reading it, like, I
yeah,
could picture myself before I
just
got it, like, what it would
so
feel like
many
in my
times.
hands and just, oh my god, and I used to get up under the covers and especially with Animorphs or whatever, I would get up under the covers and read it at night, and I had, like, a little light that I'd have up under there, I'd have a little flashlight up under there reading my book, and my mom tell me to go to bed. I had those glow in the dark stars in my room,
Oh
kids
yeah,
used to take them and you put them up on your, ceiling and all of
classic.
that stuff, like, oh,
Yeah.
man, what a time.
I honestly feel like kids today, boy, I sound so old, but like the joy of catalogs and things like that has are lost nowadays because now you can just go on a website and go, "Hey, that I want it." Buy.
Right.
But like you got a catalog or a brochure about something, or like we would even get like the Columbia Record Club or whatever. Well, I
Mhm.
don't think we had Columbia necessarily, but one of those for
Yeah, where you could buy
movies
the
or whatever.
CDs. Yeah.
Yeah. And you would just sit there and look at it, and it would have little tiny images of the cover of the thing that you
Mhm.
wanted or the item, or like every year department stores would put out their big like holiday season
Right.
catalogs, and there would be like a big toy section, and I remember just looking through all the cool stuff that was like I looked through the images of the Power Ranger stuff that year, which I think was 94, 93, something like that. I
Probably.
just constantly just like
Yeah.
for weeks and weeks and weeks up leading up to the thing,
You'd be
and
so excited. Yeah,
you'd be
it's just there's no
so
build up
excited.
to it.
There's
So,
no
like, with my youngest daughter, they do still send home a brochure, that has some of the photos and stuff in there, but they just kinda send it home a couple of days before.
right.
Like, there's no real big build up. You see a couple of little signs around the school, and they're like, "Oh, it's the book fair." Like, but the
Yeah.
kids don't have the same she's excited about it because that's just she's a book nerd, so she
Mhm.
spends a lot of time, like, reading books. She's into taking AR tests and all the stuff like that, and she's been, like, the most prolific reader in her class for a couple of years now, but that's her pastime, and her hobby is to read books, but, yeah, when you go, you just don't see the kids having the excitement and stuff like that that they used to have anymore.
Yeah.
Everything's gotten expensive now,
Mm.
so now to take the kids to the bookstore, to the Scholastic Book Fair, you gotta come with, like, 75, $100 to really be able to get anything that they want, and I'm like, it's lost a lot of its allure. It looks pretty now. The books aren't just kind of, like, scrolled out. They have, like, these nice little displays that they put up.
Oh,
They
I'm
still do it in the
sure.
library at her school, but they
Mhm.
have these nice little displays and kind of have things arranged really nicely, and then they have another table that's set up with all, like, these pencils and bookmarks and, kind of all the little accessory things that a person, would want or whatever, but yeah, it's just they don't have the same excitement, and like I said, I think it's because I really think it's because of the same thing that you said, that we just don't, the days of like flipping through a catalog and
Mhm.
looking at things like months or weeks in advance or whatever and getting that excitement about it are just gone now.
Yeah, it's impossible to get
Yeah.
excited about things, like, because you can just pre-order stuff immediately, and then you're just like,
Right.
well, then there's nothing to, I mean, there's the getting the thing to look forward to, I guess,
Right.
but you can pre-order stuff so far in advance that it's
Hmm.
like, you, like, lose interest in the thing. Like,
Yeah.
you need to have anticipation. It's like, on this day, you will be able to go and get this thing, and it's just like, that's
Right. Yeah. And it trickles over to TV too. I mean, really, when you think about it, like, watching your favorite cartoons and then trying to figure out what happens on the next episode or whatever. Like, there's not a whole lot of that anymore because the next episode for a lot of what kids watch now is on Netflix. So if they wait 5 seconds, the next episode is right there for them. Kind of sucks. Which is why I'm glad that Doctor Who is doing like
Yeah.
that. More shows are kind of getting more into, okay, we may release a couple of episodes at a time, but then we're going to trickle out the rest of the season. Like,
Mm,
give us something to anticipate. But even then, some of that's taken away because now there's like a trailer for the next episode, a
mm,
trailer for every next episode. It's like, don't show me a trailer. I don't want to know.
yeah.
I don't want to see it.
Let me be excited
Let me be
without,
excited.
yeah. Pete Holmes has this bit that I've taken to heart. I mean, it's a joke bit, but it's true, which is that the time between knowing things and not knowing, or knowing, not knowing things and knowing things is so small now that
Hmm.
knowing stuff feels just like not knowing it, because you've
Right.
had no time to, like, learn it.
Yeah.
Like, so you can just go, what is this? Hey, what's that? Oh, let me look it up. Oh, okay. And that's it. There's no,
Right.
you're never impregnated with wonder, to use his word. Um, uh, and yeah, I feel like that's the same with, like, and so anyway, the point I was making with the Scholastic Book Fair is that these books would come out like, a few times a year. You'd have, I think 96, it looks like 5 of the books came out, and that
Hmm.
seems to be about 97. There was like 10, it looks like, just a huge
It was
amount
a
of
lot.
books.
Yeah.
Um, and so they would come out every few months, and sometimes some months would have 2 books come out at a time, and some would, there'd be a month off or something like that. But what I think is really cool is that you would not necessarily know what the next book was going to be. And
No.
so I wonder, like, would you get, how the next Animorph is out, and you maybe would know the title, and then you would get it and it'd be like, oh, he turns into a poodle. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, that's not a cool animal at all.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely a couple. I remember there being definitely a couple of stories that's just kind of like, I mean, as there would be with 54
Yeah,
books,
of course.
main books. Like, there are going to be
Yeah.
some things that are duds or whatever. It's just kind of like, or whatever. But even then, you're still like waiting for still like have the anticipation of waiting for the next thing to
Yeah.
come and where the story is going next.
And I find that too with, like, comic books, and I know we're in the media, and so, like, but they send out solicits for, or like, previews or whatever, cover images even, like, months ahead. So it's like, the newest kind of run of X-Men comics, again, I'm obsessed, but um just started basically like a month or so ago.
Mhm.
Um but we already knew what the cover of issue 4 was going to be, because they have it, it's like,
Yeah,
what,
but why?
but why exactly? Like,
I don't need to know that 6 months before it
yeah,
happens. Like, reveal the cover at the last possible minute.
yeah, yeah.
Like, that builds up the hype and the anticipation because maybe you catch an Easter egg on the cover, or sometimes it ruins the surprise of things. Like, that happens a whole lot too
Mhm.
with them releasing covers out, we're releasing trailers out and stuff. Like, an eagle-eyed person can be like, oh, there's that character that nobody has seen in 5 years. They're back.
Yeah.
I see them right there on that cover. I saw them in the trailer, and it's like, so stupid.
Yeah,
And
and
then you're upset because you've revealed or the audience has discovered something, but you put it in front of their face.
I know.
Like,
We run into that so much,
goodness.
because, like, if it's in a trailer, technically it isn't a spoiler
It's not
because
a
they're
spoiler.
choosing to tell us, but, like,
Yes.
sometimes, hey, you should not have put that in a trailer, and we know
Right.
that, but we can't change the rules.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, it's right there. So it's a very weird time, but I can't
Yeah,
imagine,
and that's the
like,
one thing about the Animorphs books, like,
yeah,
covers, like, and for Goosebumps, really, for that matter, like, you get a little bit of hint of, like, where the story is going and maybe what
mm,
kind of animal is gonna be involved, but you had no idea. you read the back, they give you like a synopsis, and even the synopsis doesn't even prepare you for the weirdness that
Yeah.
you are about to embark on.
Now, was this the kind of thing where you could subscribe to them and like get them like, pay a yearly fee or whatever and get them all
Yes.
mailed
Mhm.
to you? Mm,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I tended to kind of buy them in like little mini bulks, though.
sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
so usually it was like a book fair thing, or again, like if I could find them at like again, I could find them at the library sometimes. I
Mm,
didn't own all of them. Some of them I did end up just kind of like renting them at the
sure.
library, reading them, and then returning them back or whatever. And sometimes I was glad of that because there are some books that you just don't like as much as others.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, you were able to subscribe and get them on a
Um,
regular basis.
yeah, because I feel like that was, I mean, with that much regularity, like
Mhm.
if you were all in on those things, you wanted to make sure
Yeah.
you didn't miss one.
Right, right, yeah, because I definitely had friends that were, in different situations, and
Yeah.
that was something they were able to do. And
Yeah.
I'd be like, "Don't tell me anything or I'll hurt you."
Yeah. Ooh, that's even worse. Like,
Right.
than a TV show. Like, oh, you spoiled what happened in last night's episode. It's like, I waited a whole month for this book and you
Right.
spoiled it. Like,
Don't spoil it for me.
or possibly I waited 6 months for this
Yeah,
book
and the
because
the wait never seemed long because I was always, like, reading so many things at one
sure.
time, so it was really cool. I wasn't hyper fixated on any one thing.
And I can't imagine any of these were like that long of books either. Like, I bet they
No,
were
no,
pretty
like, usually
like
you get
100
them, and
pages or
I
whatever.
it was very the high of it was very short-lived because usually I'd read it in, like, a day,
Sure.
maybe 2, during the times of being a kid where you have time to just sit down on a Saturday and spend your whole Saturday reading a book.
Um,
A simpler
appar-
time of life.
apparently there are audiobooks of these now.
Really?
Scholastic Audio in 2020 released an uncut audio version of the series.
So they jumped on the I didn't know that, but they jumped on the hype in a very smart way because that was back in 2020. That was the same year that all the chatter about them being available online and all of
And
that
they
stuff because
announced a
people were looking
movie.
for things to do. What
hmm
happened? I never heard anything else about a movie.
So, interesting thing about the movie, there were several there was talk about it as early as 2015, but in
Mhm.
2020 that it was announced that they were going to make one, um and uh Catherine and her husband,
They backed out though, didn't they?
they did back out not
Yeah.
long after, actually. So like in June 2020 they announced
Mhm.
the movie was in development, and then by October 2020 they had left the project citing creative differences. But at this point, I don't think anything else has happened,
Oh,
other than
man.
them not being involved. And here's the thing: I adaptation is what it is, but like
Mhm.
I feel like if you're going out of your way to change the approach or something like that to the point where the author doesn't want anything to do with it, that feels like
Yeah,
you're
you
making the
should
wrong
leave it
choice.
alone. Yeah,
Yeah.
because then it's turning into something that's not what the audience wants or what the author how the author intended their story to be
hmm
told. I mean, there's always some creative license. Of course, you can't do the exact same things in a book that you are going to do on a television series, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, but man, it would
Yeah.
be I would love I mean, I guess a movie, I don't know, it's so much to try to fit into a film. I think it would be a rad TV series though.
Yeah.
Like,
I think so.
yeah.
I feel like, yeah, I mean, like you said, like a Disney or some channel could make a really cool TV show that's aimed at younger audience, but like with not
Yeah.
talking down to them, because I don't feel like the
Yeah.
books ever really talk down to the
No, no,
audience.
no, no. I mean, they respected, even though they know you may not have been necessarily super tuned into anything. I think there were some things in there that probably, as an adult, might ring, a little bit clearer for you or whatever. But they definitely treated kids as intelligent
Mm,
human beings.
yeah, as well they
Yeah,
should, I think.
yeah, who can
Like,
handle and should know about things that are happening. I mean, even though they're telling it through a sci-fi perspective, should know about things that are happening in the world around them.
did you know there was a toy line briefly,
I did.
and they were part of the Transformers line, which I do think is smart that Hasbro jumped on those. Um,
That does make sense.
and because they'd already made the Beast Wars toys, so they
Hmm.
it's like, we can make animals look relatively realistic. Um, I don't think I ever saw them in the world though, because I don't know
No,
how.
yeah, I don't
Like, it's
I
one thing to
remember
make it.
them existing, but I don't remember
Yeah.
ever seeing them, and I know I didn't have any. So,
Let's see what they look like. I'm gonna Google them now. I'm using I'm
I'm
using what we
afraid to see what they look like.
I'm using what we call Google, folks. Toys 1999 Hasbro. Let's find out. Um, well, I mean, they definitely look like Beast Wars. It's a very simple. They don't really look like people. That's the weird thing. Like, the problem is um, you can make an animal transform into a robot, and the robot can kind of be bulky and weird and have feet sticking out because
Right.
that's normal. But like,
Yeah, I'm
when
looking at one right now, and I'm like, mm,
I think it's weird. I'll just go ahead and
yeah.
say I think it's weird. I think it's cool that they made them, but it is weird. Also, did they not make
And there's
a
one where you
Rachel
can
one?
see Jake's face, but he
Yeah.
looks very grown. Like he was
Yeah,
that's
very
not what
much
he looked
so.
like. Like not on the, covers and stuff like that. Like that doesn't I don't know who that is. He looks like somebody from Street Fighter.
Oh,
Weird.
this is like there's see if you can find this is fun for people at home, I'm sure. Driving in your
Yes.
car and not being able to do it. Look for the Rachel Lion one, because she doesn't look like a person. She looks like a mutated lion.
No, she does not look like a person. I'm looking at that one now. Oh
Oh,
my
and the
god.
Jake Bear one is the same thing. He
Yes.
actually looks like who's the I guess number one on the Umbrella Academy. Like, he just is enormous but has a very small head.
Oh, Luther. Yeah.
Luther, thank you.
Yeah.
These are silly. I gotta say,
That's what he looks like, right? I was like, yeah, he looks like a big grown man.
yeah,
Like
the Marco
these were
Gorilla one. That's exactly it.
yeah, these
This
were
is silly.
teenagers. Like
These are.
why are they so jacked up? Like
I
that
appreciate
ain't what they look like.
the conceit, but I do
Yes.
not think these
No.
worked well.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry to those
May
people,
need to give
but
that another try in 2024.
so the TV show had people that you would recognize now as younger stars, and it was made in Canada,
Mhm.
as a lot of Nickelodeon shows were made in Canada before Nickelodeon Studios started, and also thereafter. YTV, which is basically the Nickelodeon analog for Canada, co-produced it. And the actor you have definitely seen who played Jake is Shawn Ashmore, who went on to be in the X-Men series and then other things. You've definitely seen
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Um, but one of my earliest sort of LA like celebrity sightings, I used to work at this bookstore. I'm sure I've mentioned it before, and if not, whatever. People who know, I talk about the bookstore a lot because it was a formative time in my years in LA. But
Yeah.
it was an industry bookstore, a theater and film bookstore, so we would get actors coming in all the time,
Mhm.
to get plays or to just whatever. It was kind of a cool place. But Brooke Nevin, who played Rachel,
Rachel.
Rachel,
Yeah.
came in one time, actually a few times, but the first time she came in, I was just like, that's Rachel from Animorphs. And this was so long afterwards.
Right.
This was in 2008. So
Yeah.
a good decade or more since she stopped playing the character. But I was just like, oh my God, it's her
Oh
from
my god, it's Rachel from Animorphs.
Animorphs. It was one of the dumbest. I I didn't care that much that George Clooney walked by like a
Right.
couple times a week because he lived nearby. But um
Yeah. I don't remember seeing her in any other like big role after that though. Like she had some smaller like
yeah.
appearances on other Nickelodeon shows and stuff like that, but I don't know that she was in anything big. Like she seemed like she's had a steady acting career, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It definitely looks like
Yeah, nothing that
um
was like longer than like a guest appearance or
right. Yeah, she
something
was
like that. Yeah.
and a lot of stuff that filmed in Canada too, like, but I mean she's got like her IMDb and Wikipedia is like super long. Um she's on that show Good Trouble is the most recent thing. Which
Okay.
I have not seen.
Interesting.
But a lot of
I've
just
heard of
TV,
it, but I haven't watched it before.
a lot of Hallmark stuff. But anyway, um uh one of the other actors who played Axe was this actor Paolo Costanzo, who was on Royal Pains, the USA
Mhm.
show.
Yeah.
and he was on the Friends spinoff Joey. Love all that stuff. I don't think anybody else from the cast really was like super famous or anything like that. Not that any of those three are super famous, but
Yeah, no, it didn't stick around very long.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah, it's really, you know, the first season was 20 episodes and then the second season was only 6 and then they were done.
Oh my God.
Dunzo.
They put out
Uh
those first few and just were like, all right. The second season is like, all right, we're done.
yeah.
We don't want to do this anymore.
I guess so. I wonder if it says
Yeah.
why. Um
I don't think I ever knew why. And I don't remember how presumably it left people on some sort of cliffhanger. I would guess. I mean, I can't imagine that you had a 6 episode second season unless they just gave them time to finish the story. But I honestly do not remember. I remember how the books end, but
hmm.
I do not remember how that television show ends at all.
Yeah, I definitely don't. Um
Yeah, I've just seen weird clips of it online.
uh uh, uh yeah, it just sort of ends. It just sort of stops.
Nice.
You don't care for that. They did change
It's on
some of the
Tubi. I'm gonna go find it on Tubi.
I hope you have a great time with that.
I'm just gonna go watch the last episode. That's it. I'm not gonna watch
Oh,
any of the other stuff to refresh my memory. I'm just gonna watch the very last episode.
well, it's the last it was a 3-part finale. So you do
Oh
have to watch the
heck.
last 3
No.
episodes. I'm
Well,
sorry. Sorry to say. All 3 written and directed by Ron Oliver, whoever that was. I'm guessing the
yeah. Hope you
Nope.
carried them out well, Ron.
Yeah. Good job, Ron. Ron Olivier. Um yeah, so I love stuff like this. I think, and revisiting, I'm glad that so many of these kids shows are on some platform that we can watch.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it's a nostalgia trip. Like I've definitely been trying to find like old cartoons, like really obscure ones. A lot of them are on YouTube, but like, ones that I loved growing up that I think, could be well suited to return, same as
Mm.
Animorphs. Animorphs has more longevity, I think, with people because you spend more time with books.
Yeah.
Even if you only, read them in a weekend or overnight or whatever, but like, that's still more time than like an episode a week of, whatever.
Right, right.
You do feel like those characters a lot. So I think there's a love for Animorphs that I think is on a par with something, I'm
Yeah,
trying
at
to
the
think of
beginning of
something else.
COVID, it was really cool to see people coming out
Yeah.
and talking about it and, talking about how much they loved it and everything. And it was nice to know that Catherine Applegate saw that
Yeah.
love and like, responded to it and appreciated it and all of that stuff like that. Yeah, because I mean, I guess it's just like any other thing. I mean, we do creative things, other people that do creative things. I mean, you put things out in the world and you hope that they last and that, they can impact people for as long as they can. So to know that they're still like having an impact and people still care about them. And I mean, there are, even now you go on YouTube, there are all sorts of YouTube videos out there where people talk about their favorite covers and some of the weirdest storylines. And there was a video that I saw out there, matter of fact, a few weeks ago. It was a guy that was breaking down every single book in the series, and he would sum the book up in one sentence. Like the whole entire video is like 20, like maybe less than 30 minutes long or whatever. But he went through all of the books and just like summed them up in one sentence. And so many comments were under there, like, oh my God, like you literally just like restarted something in my nostalgia
Mm,
brain. And I completely forgot about this. Or, oh man, yeah, I used to love Animorphs. Or remember the TV show? We wish it would come back. Maybe they would do something different with it. It'd be awesome to bring it back now. So it was like a lot of like love and good feels in
yeah,
the comments. And I love stuff like that. Like that's
me too.
it's the good bits of nostalgia.
Yeah, it's so I talk about that a lot on the shows is the kind of dangerous side of nostalgia and then how it kind of breeds contempt in a lot of ways for anything different. But like, there's something
Yeah.
like that meant a lot to a lot of people. And it's like the revisitation of it is sort of it never got mainstreamed, and so the revisitation of it becomes
Right.
fun and cathartic for people, and not like and maybe it's good that the movie doesn't seem like it's going anywhere because like
Yeah.
it's only going to let people down, I think is the
Yeah. It
main
may
thing
be
we
better
see.
for it just to exist as it is now. It's just like this little pocket of,
Mhm.
wonderful, nostalgic, weird, violent, angry books with kids turning into animals and fighting a war,
I love it. Well,
murdering aliens in mass, all those
yeah.
wonderful things.
Weird, sort of like centaur-looking aliens. So I didn't mention
Yeah,
that, but they're quadrupedal, but they have a humanoid torso and arms. So yeah,
fun things.
interesting
Yeah.
looking aliens. Um, folks, at home, did you read the Animorphs? Did you watch the TV show? What were your favorite young adult or kid novels to read? I remember when I didn't know they were called novels. They were called chapter books. Um, they were always called novels, but that's what we
Yeah.
called them in school. Was always
Chapter
chapter
books.
books.
Hmm.
Um, what were some of your favorites? Maybe if it sparks joy for any of us, maybe we'll do an episode about your favorite book. I do think we should do one about Goosebumps at some point because that's fun. And
Yes.
maybe around the Halloween season we can talk about that and Are You Afraid of the Dark and stuff like that. And
Ooh,
anthology
Are You
horror
Afraid of the
for
Dark is
kids is a
fun.
huge like passion of mine because
Yeah, I've
I
been
think
revisiting How You Are You Afraid of the Dark. That's the fun thing about having kids too, is just being able to go back and
yeah,
revisit some of those things from your childhood and or whatever. And I'm like, man, those stories were creepy.
yeah, and they're all in Paramount Plus too, which is
Yeah,
um a huge win. And I'm pretty sure you can watch the Goosebumps show as well, but I don't think that show was as good. Just go ahead and say it. But anyway,
indeed.
that's for another show. Ty, how can people get a hold of you on the internet should they choose to do so?
Sure. I can be found at Nerdist, of course, where I'm always writing and talking about all sorts of fun and wonderful things. And I am also on Instagram at writer Tai Gooden.
I am on Instagram at functional_nerd. You can also follow me on Letterboxd to see all the weird stuff I've been watching at Kyle_Anderson. Thank you all for listening to Laser Focus. You can write to the show at laserfocus@nerdist.com and let us know all those things like I mentioned earlier. And just tell us what you think of the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts would be very helpful. Please tell everyone that you like it if you like it because it helps people find the show. And I think we have a fun show. This is episode 61, I believe. So like we have definitely been going for a while. So anyway, thank you all for listening. I've been Kyle Anderson. Join me again next week on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit nerdist.com.